Check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Darius Jafari, the editor-in-chief of Lookout, Arizona's only nonprofit LGBTQ plus newsroom, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. All registered voters can vote in the general election, which will be held on November 5th. The voter registration deadline is October 7th, and early voting begins on October 9th. Voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by email at debates@kc-a.com. You can text us at 408-840-8350, or you can call us at 480-937-1253. Just so you know, we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight, we'll be hearing from candidates in Legislative District 12, which covers a mixture of urban, suburban, and rural areas, including Chandler, Tempe, Ahwatukee Foothills, and the Gila River. It's a great diversity of land and population. We will kick off the evening by hearing first from the candidates in the Senate by party, who will debate their opponent for approximately 1 hour. Then we'll move over to the House candidates and conclude around 8 p.m. Only the candidates currently debating will appear with their cameras and microphones on. So viewers at home know candidates have not been given the questions beforehand, and the questions have been crafted by voters as well as by us here at Lookout. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to other candidates' comments after they conclude speaking, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes and will remind the candidates in the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. I'm going to make one ask that you please keep this debate respectful, like I said, and civil. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may be informed. We are not here to go viral. Candidates for the state Senate, which you can vote for, you can vote for one. We have current incumbent Senator Mitzi Epstein, a Democrat, and her Republican challenger, Cara Vicini. In the House, voters get to vote for two candidates. Your candidates are incumbent Democrats Patty Contreras and Stacey Travers, and Republican Lawrence Hudson. Let's bring in our Senate candidates. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order, by last name starting for opening comments. Closing comments will go in reverse order. Senator Epstein, you will start the opening remarks. Go ahead.
Well, thank you to everybody at Clean Elections and to you for taking the time to be our moderator tonight, Joseph. This is, I think the Clean Elections opportunity for debate has been fantastic. I'm going to be honest, I liked it better when it was live and in person. We could see people, but all things considered, this is a great way to get things done and help people to know who thinks what and what our plans are. So kudos. Thank you. I am Mitzi Epstein, your state senator. By profession, I'm a computer systems analyst. I've worked for big corporations in manufacturing and finance. For instance, I worked in the Treasury Department at Citicorp, and I own a small business called Custom Language Training that has been on hiatus pretty much since I've been working as a legislator because I believe in serving the people of Arizona in the legislature full time. But I went from computer systems and that kind of communicating to languages, world languages, and helping people learn them on the job with my business Custom Language Training because communication just gets things done. So I've come from the business sector, and I've always thought that a thriving economy demands an excellent education system. We also now are facing a housing crisis, so we in the Senate Senate Democratic Caucus are working on affordable housing options, especially for seniors and young families. And of course, sustainable water solutions are important for people living in our residences as well as our businesses. As your state senator and a computer systems analyst, I am a problem solver with a successful track record. I've led and supported statewide bipartisan teams to pass legislation to help you get what you paid for in your health insurance policy and to improve unemployment insurance for workers and for employers. Your purchasing power for food, medicine, gasoline, and your power to choose your own path in life are top of mind for me. Arizona has a large job market now, and our policies should make it affordable to get the education and childcare that you need to move up in life.
I'm going to
As a
stop.
small- Great.
I'm going to stop you there. We're at 2 minutes. Ms. Bassini, I'll go ahead and give you 2 minutes as well.
Thank you so much. I have 1 minute that I prepared, so we're good. And then we can recoup 1 minute. Good evening. Thank you very much to the Clean Elections Commission for giving me this opportunity to run my campaign for Arizona State Senate. I'm very grateful and thankful. I am Cara Bassini, and I'm running for Arizona State Senate because we've had enough of watching what's being done to this state and our country. Due to Democratic open border policies, the neighborhoods we used to walk in with total safety have become no-go zones for the law-abiding. You know, the necessities that we once bought without a second thought are painful to buy or are out of reach entirely. Our schools, unfortunately, are ranked last in the nation due to recent information coming out. And unfortunately, again, our elections cannot be trusted by our people. Tonight, my opponent will try to convince you these problems are being addressed or possibly outright deny they are even happening. But if you're like me, you see it with your eyes and you feel it in your bank account. I am committed to being the voice of the people. This is the fundamental story of my campaign. Thank you.
Thank you both. We're going to start off the top of this debate with education, a really heated topic right now, something you both just spoke about. Let's start off with Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship Accounts, or ESAs, which allow students to use taxpayer money that would ordinarily go to public school to attend a private school instead. These are incredibly controversial, as even this week we saw that ESAs were being questioned if they could be used for a flat earth curriculum. Another report, as Ms. Bassini mentioned, had our education ranked dead last in the nation. Now lawmakers passed legislation this year to open up ESAs to all 1.1 million students to Arizona, and education advocates are attempting to refer that law to the ballot, as they did with a similar law in 2018 that was resoundingly defeated at the ballot. For Ms. Bassini, do you support the extension of ESAs to all Arizona students? And if so, how do you explain the overwhelming vote to not do that in the last general election?
I absolutely support the ESA program. I would like to point out a recent article by 12 News, whereas Superintendent of Schools Tom Horn mentioned that the numbers don't lie. The Department of Education met a $9.7 billion in financial obligations with $4 million to spare. So ultimately, it's mathematically impossible that the ESA programs are contributing to any state budget deficit. Now, in contrast, sharp contrast to my opponent, Mitzi Epstein's comment regarding the ESA, and I quote, "No matter how you slice it, Republicans expanded government costs with the expanded voucher program. It's an expansion of government to the tune of 65,000 to 68,000 kids. This is not an expansion of government, thank goodness. This is a program that works. The parents like it, and therefore I like it. And I will continue to support this measure. Students and families use these funds to empower the students to achieve education excellence. And Democrats need to work on what's broken and fix that, not destroy programs that parents and teachers like. Therefore, if parents support the ESA program, so do I.
Wonderful. For Senator Epstein, do you think ESA should be expanded in any way? Would you vote to eliminate the ESA program altogether if Democrats take control of the legislature?
I'm a problem solver, and that means that we start by defining the problem and then we look at potential solutions. So let's take a look at some of the problems. Problem number one, flat earth curriculum. Let that sink in. They want to use ESA, your tax dollars, to teach that the earth is flat. Now, that's not true. Everybody who's ever gone up in a plane, everybody who's ever received a package from Amazon knows that that plane has to adjust for the curvature of the earth. That's physics, that's practicality. The earth is not flat, but that's what they want to use your tax dollars to do. So that's a great big problem. That's the problem of what are they going to teach with ESA money? The next problem is, are children safe? There are no laws to keep your children safe when ESA dollars are used. That's a big problem too. If we're using our tax money, we want to make sure children are safe, because where the money goes, something will grow. We want to make sure it's a good, wonderful thing for our children. And finally, our budget. It was terribly irresponsible of my Republican colleagues to expand government in this way and not provide any way to pay for it. And that's what they did. So the bottom line is that the ESA expansion caused everything else in the state to lose. And that contributed to the $2 billion deficit that we were faced with. And that's why we have so many problems in our budget in addition to these specific ESA problems. So number one, what are they teaching? Number two, are the children safe? And number three, how are we paying for it? Because right now, the bottom line is it's draining money away from public schools. And that's why there are certainly not true that all parents like the ESA program. Parents with their kids in their wonderful neighborhood school, more than 85% of the parents in Arizona would like to have their public schools funded fully before we expand to flat earth.
I want to go back to Ms. Vicini on this, because there have been complaints, or at least concerns, about curriculums and ESAs being used for certain curriculums that may not be scientifically valid, that may be questionable. Do you think that ESA should at least be reined in any kind of way, or do you think that they should be carte blanche?
No, I don't necessarily say that anything should be carte blanche, because at the end of the day, we have to understand that this is funded through a program that needs oversight. We need checks and balances in any aspect of government, and most certainly government funding. But when we talk about the ESA program, the reason the ESA program even exists is because the public education system has failed our students and our parents. And this is the real issue as to how this even became to be. If parents are sending their children to school and they are not happy with curriculum that involves CRT, DEI, and social engineering, they're going to take their kids out of school, and they're going to look for other ways to educate their children in a safer environment. And I absolutely advocate for that. I do not feel it is important for our children to be learning social engineering when they can't focus on the core subjects. Core subjects are first. And if I may add, I would like to see a little bit more of them going in and out doors and getting some outdoor activity instead of constantly being cooped up in a classroom. But when we talk about flat earth, globe earth, hollow earth, you know what? Those are theories. No one has ever proven that the earth is round. No one has ever proven that it's flat or hollow, and everyone has what I would call a different opinion. Now, I went to school learning that we have a globe earth. All right, well, you know what? Maybe there's other theories that could be thought about, and this is what opens children's minds. We cannot just focus and give them tunnel vision and say, this is what it is, and that's all there is to it. We want to expand their thinking and give them the tools to be successful.
Before I move on, just two things I want to fact check there. One, critical race theory is a college program that is not actually being taught in high schools as far as we understand. There's been no proof of that as far as been brought up. And then round earth is actually scientifically true, not a theory. But I want to move on to a question for both of you. Arizona's constitution requires college to be as nearly free as possible. Is it? I mean, one of the things that we've seen is college prices being hiked up year over year. Is college as nearly free as possible? And if not, how would you reel in tuition costs for Arizona students? Ms. Vicini, I'll start with you.
Reeling in tuition costs, and you're referring to colleges?
Yes.
Well, we could possibly secure our borders and stop throwing money away so that we can focus on Arizonians first. That would be the first thing that I would go to. We have a lot of oversight that's not really taking place with regard to colleges. Now, I will mention that there are ways that we could regulate some of the money that's going into the colleges, but I don't particularly see any issues with colleges other than hearing that they don't want to be taught CRT or DEI. And I do hear that children in some of the schools that are not in college are being taught social engineering ideologies. There are curriculum that I certainly don't agree with. There are explicit materials in the schools and the classrooms. And so these are the things that are taking away from keeping their eye on the ball. I think that universities can manage their budgets. I know that when I went to college, I paid for my college courses. So when we talk about public universities or public colleges, there should be plenty of funding in there for them to teach whatever they like. But I'm talking about those K through 12 kids. We've got to protect them.
Senator Epstein.
You know, I got to be honest, I'm just a little flabbergasted about the number of conspiracy theories I've just heard rattled off, but I'm going to try to respond just quickly to the question you asked, which is about college. So college tuition needs to be affordable. In Arizona, our state colleges, NAU, ASU, and UA, really do work hard to try to make it affordable and try to make it very open. So I know ASU best because that's the one in our district, and they are just one of the most enormous universities, huge student population, because they have the philosophy of let's try to let every student who applies get a great education from ASU. And so they have colleges that are just the best of the best in the nation, and they're just enormous. And so our universities are doing a great job. In the legislature, though, we frequently stand up to them and say, look, you are putting tons of money into research, and that's good for our economic development. That's great for research, but also we need you to keep tuition low. And so very frequently when the universities ask for more money for capital improvements and other things, the Democratic caucus stands up for students and faculty. So we stand up to say, you know what? I've heard from the faculty in the English department because they're my neighbors. The ASU faculty live in our district. And they've told me that there are buildings in the language arts department that really need some help. And yet the university is super focused on new STEM buildings. Well, it's our job as a representative of the people, including our ASU professors who live in our district, to stand up for you and say, you know what, ASU, I get to talk to Michael Crow, the president of the university, and it's my job to tell him your faculty, and your students in all of the parts of the university need first-rate buildings and need first-rate curricula to learn the best. So we stand up for the students, we stand up for the faculty in a variety of ways, just meeting with the universities from time to time. And then the second thing is we watch out for public universities.
I'm actually going to stop you off because you're at the 2-minute mark, but thank you very much. Ms. Messina, you stated in your Clean Elections Voter Education Guide, you made a statement that, quote, we must protect our children and structure education as a tool for high-level learning and not indoctrination or social engineering. You've kind of mentioned it tonight. What indoctrination are you speaking on?
Well, I'm just going to say this. I was quite shocked. I have not attended public school in Arizona because I grew up in Florida. And I was hearing a lot of things on television and the news that I just didn't think was actually happening. I thought it was just kind of like that fake news stuff. But then I started to speak with, once I started to campaign, with parents. And I started to hear about a lot of things that are happening within these schools, and I'm referring to K through 12, where they felt that their children were being indoctrinated on various subjects. And one of those subjects, the most important subject for me, which was very strange, we want to talk about flat earth and these types of things, are gender. That's an indoctrination when our children are questioning their very gender. I personally do not align with that. I would sit the children down and explain to them exactly the birds from the bees as far as gender is concerned. I think we need to tread very carefully and what we teach our children. Our children are our future leaders. We cannot continue to indoctrinate these types of ideologies. So as an example, when I actually started to hear from parents on the ground that there was books in schools that were alluding to these things with gender and these types of things, I really became sad. It's part of one of the reasons why I'm running for office. Why? Because I don't think we need that in our classrooms. We need core subjects, simple things, reading, writing, math, arithmetic. We don't need to be indoctrinated in any way. And if anyone thinks it's not happening, well, then I would have to say, why have so many parents removed their children from the public education system? This was one of the reasons. And so that is what I'm speaking about.
Before I let the senator respond, a follow-up to you on that. You mentioned that you wouldn't mind a free kind of market of ideas when it comes to maybe different theories of science. Why then would you not mind a different set of theories or ideologies when it comes to gender?
Because there is no theory on gender. If you say to me today that the globe Earth is proven, well, that's what you read in your history books as well as I. But I have an open mind, and I know what I see when I'm looking at an airplane, but I'm going to keep my personal opinions to myself. But at the end of the day, it's still a way to seek knowledge. I am not going to sit here and question your gender or my gender or anyone's gender. And I'm not going to teach lies to children about gender that they are not. So when we speak about the globe Earth and these types of theories, it's a great thing for scientists to come together and have their ideas. And, you know, a lot of people don't understand when we use a map, for example, when we're using our Google Maps, these maps are based on geocentric maps. So if anybody did a little bit of research, they would understand how that works. I have done a lot of research, but I do not have to research gender. And so this is important to me that we teach children.
I'm going to stop you right there because you're at a minute response. Senator, I'd like for you to comment on that as not only a former member of the Kyron School Board, but now as a member of the Senate who has had to listen to debates on these bills that have passed through the Senate and the House and have been vetoed by the governor. How many teachers and school administrations have you talked to on this subject? And can you talk to this supposed indoctrination that Ms. Vicini is speaking on?
Thank you. The first thing, so yes, I've been a member of the Kyron School Board, and I keep in touch with teachers. I go visit classrooms very regularly all the time, in addition to my 25 years plus of being in schools as a parent advocate. I've never been a teacher. People often ask me, but I'm not. Kara Vicini, I'm so glad you're running, and I'm so glad to have this opportunity to say to you, please do the research on gender, because you do need to do it. You need to talk to physicians and find out about hormones and find out about children who are born with not the typical kinds of chromosomes. And you need to find out what it's like to feel that you are physically a gender that is different from what your birth certificate says, because that's true. And what we want to work with our laws at the legislature is this. People who are transgender, people who are gay, should not be beaten up in bathrooms.
I wouldn't.
They should not lose their jobs.
Ms. Vicini, I'll give you a chance to respond for 30 seconds when she's finished.
And that's what our goal is in all of our laws, is to make sure that people's safety is protected, and we should not be physically abusing children, and we should not be allowing bullying to happen to children who identify differently in any way in a school. And that includes being transgender, being gay. It's a reality. So I really encourage you to do the research and to learn more about this topic. There's a lot to learn.
I'm going to let Ms. Vicini, I'm going to let you have 30 seconds to respond because I want to move on to a different topic, but go ahead, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. Senator Epstein, I do appreciate your comment with regard to gender. Transgender should not take place with our children. They're still children and they are still figuring out their life. And you know what? That's up to the parents what they want to do with their child, and referring to transgender. Bullying has happened since the dawn of time, and it isn't just about transgender. It's about if you're too pretty, you're too ugly, you're too fat, you're too skinny, and you will be bullied. Too smart.
And I'm going to stop it right there so we can move on.
Sure.
All right. So we're going to transition over to voting. So for both, I want to start off with a very basic question. Do you believe President Joe Biden won the 2020 race? This is a question submitted by members of the Clean Election Commission, by survey respondents from the Clean Election Commission. Do you believe President Joe Biden won the 2020 race? Ms. Fassini, yes or no?
Do you only want a yes or no? Is that how you want me to respond?
Sorry, yes, because there's a follow-up question based on that. Would you mind just responding yes or no?
So my answer is no.
So if no, how would you respond to if multiple courts have decided that ballots were counted accurately, even the Hound camps that showed that, along with the Trump-appointed committee? Why should Arizonans trust that you'll take any results as fair?
Well, you asked me about Joe Biden, so I was specifically speaking to Joe Biden.
Sure, but why should Arizonans trust that you'll take any results as fair when multiple courts across the country have decided that that count was accurate?
Okay. So in 2020, a lot of things changed, and they changed drastically. And one of the things that changed the most is people started paying attention. But they didn't start paying attention when they went to go vote. It was after they voted. So here's what I do. I pay attention to what I see with my eyes and what I hear with my ears. And what I saw was windows being boarded up, suitcases coming out from under tables and being counted in the middle of the night. Okay, I know we had cyber ninjas come here and we talked about all kinds of things that they didn't find, but no one wants to mention about a lot of the anomalies, too many details to speak of. So what I do is I take a holistic approach and I look around and I trust my instincts. And when I see not just one city or one town or even one state, but the whole nation up in arms, because you're closing windows and doing things you shouldn't be doing and pushing people out of the way, then I say something is wrong. And if something's wrong, okay, let's question it. Let's get some answers. So when you talk about courts and nothing was found, none of that means anything. What means something is that we, the people, do not trust the elections. And we want more transparency and we want to fix what's broken. And we have every right to do so. And that's the other reason I'm running for office.
Does that mean that if you were to lose this election, would you question the results?
In my particular election, I have not been in the general election yet, so I cannot answer that question for you today. I can answer that question for you once the election is over. And no, I will say that it is clear for Mitzi, it is clear for myself, and I trust that we will do things in good faith.
Senator Epstein, what's your response? First off, do you believe President Joe Biden won the 2020 race?
Yes, I trust our Republican governor and our Democratic Secretary of State and everybody else along the way who certified the election that Joe Biden won.
What's your response to, well, I guess I'll ask a more pointed question that, Ms. Fassini's point of view on this and her argument on this is not hers alone. How are you expecting to kind of bring in people across the party line on this to kind of bring them to trust elections like you do?
Right. And so, first of all, the anomalies that have been brought up from time to time, I've listened to so very many of them. And I have to say, please go to the Maricopa County Recorder's website where they have listed so many questions. Well, what about this bunch of ballots that came in? And that seems funny. And how can this possibly happen? And, there are great explanations for all of them. If I may, the leading question I've heard is people saying, well, Trump got more votes than he got more votes in 2020 than he got before. How can he possibly have lost? And the answer is math, basic math. There are more people, therefore there were more votes for everybody. So there are answers to so many of these questions. And there were 60 lawsuits. But the most important thing is, how do my constituents feel? I want our constituents to have faith in our, and because of the logic and reasoning and processes that are in place. So please go visit Maricopa County Recorders, get a tour, see all of the checks and balances that happen there. And then you'll start to feel a little more comfortable or have more educated questions, because those questions are important. I want to listen to them and we want to address them. Just as we did when we came up with Senate Bill 1733, a bipartisan solution to our election calendar problem. We had to find a way to figure out, what do we do if we have an automatic recount and we have to get all of our results to Congress by December 10th, and we have to get ballots out to our overseas military in 45 days before the election. How are we going to do all that? So Democrats, Republicans came together frequently, sometimes at a very large table, to figure out what can we do. We improved the instructions that go out to voters on their mail-in ballot. We moved up the primary. We went with a shorter cure period. We went from, instead of 5 business days to 5 calendar days, and we said they'll have to work over the weekend. It was very bipartisan. We listened to each other. We said, okay, I hear your concerns about that. And we came up with some really good solutions in this bill that was passed to fix the election calendar problem.
So Arizona has the 8th highest rate of disenfranchisement for Black voters in the U.S., according to the ACLU. Our current voter ID law has the capacity to make it harder for more than 9,000 transgender people to face issues when wanting to cast a vote. A recent glitch and update to our voter ID law has meant that 97,000 mainly older and Republican voters might face hurdles this year and forced to vote provisionally. For all of these voters, they might face voting on a provisional ballot, as I mentioned, which goes through extra verification and time. And with our races being decided by sometimes double digits, we often have to wait for results. My question first is for Ms. Fassini. You are running on integrity in elections, as you've mentioned, and your website says you want votes counted the same day. Given the complications around voting, just the numbers I just mentioned with provisional ballot counts, what's your plan to make that happen?
To count them in one day?
Yes.
Well, we can't count them in one day with the current processes in place. That's part of the issue. I don't know if anybody's aware, but there are third world countries with millions of voters that count them in one day. You know, we have a lot of ways to have sophisticated technology, but for some reason, as of 2020, because it didn't happen before 2020, please, let's make a note of that. Up until 2020, we had results the eve of the voting night. Now, I cannot understand why, for any reason, and that includes the coronavirus pandemic when that was occurring, why we would have to wait a week or 2 weeks to get results. This is not how things work. We have these processes in place, systems that should work as designed. Mail-in votes come in before the election day. You have a deadline to get them in before, so you're not getting them in that day. And if we could make smaller precincts, and we can count these ballots, it's a fallacy to say that we cannot, because we've done it before, and therefore, in my opinion, we can absolutely do it again, and we can do it better.
Just to be clear, we have almost always never had voting results on election night. We've just had closer election results, and so we've had to call races later than we've normally had. I want to go over to Senator Epstein. What's your response to that?
I'm a computer systems analyst. So in addition to figuring out computer systems, I figure out processes and what works and what doesn't work. And the complexities that we have with our elections are, I assume, more complex than any third world country, because it's not just one race. We're not just voting for president. We have back and forth of 2 pages on our ballot. That is a lot to count. And I don't know if you've ever sat in a room and done tallying it by hand, but it is a very complex process. And frankly, we had the cyber ninjas show us how to do it. And they said, we can't do it. We don't know how to do it. They came up with pretty much the same results that Joe Biden won. But they also said that the ballots that were provided to us to count in the Coliseum very accurately correlate with the official canvas numbers is what he came up with. So they did a hand count. It came out to a very close correlation to the machines. But I have to tell you this. I work with machines and I work with businesses and I work with business leaders who have enormous budgets, and they do not choose to count their widgets and what fors by hand. They count them by machines because that's more accurate. And the same is true for tallying ballots. It's just an optical reader is just so much more accurate than human eyeballs are. And that's why we need to use machines to count them. Now, should we make sure that our machines are secure? 100%. That's why all of our tally machines are not connected to the internet. They do not connect to the internet. And they are secure in so many different ways. Now, I believe every kind of a system can be hackable, but this one is awfully tight. And we have had the security of our systems checked over and over and over again by Republicans, by Democrats, by Green Party members, by Libertarians, and lots of independents as well. We really have to stop going by what a person said and go to the recorder's office and have a tour and listen to what's really happening there, rather than just what you've heard on the street from somebody or what you read in a blog or what you saw on the internet.
But Senator Epstein, your opponent is not part of a small number of people who distrust the voting system as it is. I mean, there have been hiccups that have drawn national attention. As you mentioned, we have a 2-page ballot in Maricopa this year that might cause confusion. Do you feel that the current system of voting is okay as it is?
We can improve it, no doubt. We can improve it. And that's why, we did come together and put forth a bipartisan bill that did improve our election system. And I believe that we can still do more to do it. And I'm willing and happy to listen to anybody who has some good ideas, as long as they are grounded in reality. They have checked their facts, and that's actually how things work, not just what they're, assuming or using conjecture about how things work. So happy to work with folks on that. Senator Ken Bennett was the Secretary of State, and he was senator, is still senator right now. I've had many conversations with him. He has been so motivated to try to address people's concerns. And we've done a number of things that, this is a little safer here, it's a little safer there. So I'm happy to talk with those ideas. We just want to make sure that they are grounded in reality.
I want to move over to immigration, but before we do, I just want to remind people watching from home that if you do have a question, you can submit them to any of the channels you see at the bottom of the screen, including by email at debates@kc-a.com. You can text us at 408-840-8350, or you can call us at 480-937-1253. Proposition 314 has been called by many as SB 1070 2.0. The former Arizona state bill that has resulted in hundreds of millions of state dollars going to settlement and court fees for racial discrimination against U.S. citizens. It's been described as racist, xenophobic, and a knee-jerk reaction to a more complicated problem. It's opposed by the Arizona Public Health Association, the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Phoenix, and the League of Women Voters. My first question on the subject for both of you. We've heard in the past from elected leaders and police that detainments, even temporary, are justifiable if they can curb a larger problem, such as illegal migration or drug smuggling. My question for both of you: what will happen to trust in your government if American citizens are wrongfully detained? And is that detention justifiable in order to curb a real problem like illegal migration and drug smuggling? Senator Epstein, I'll give it to you first.
Thank you. This proposition was, like so many of the referrals we've had from my Republican colleagues, extreme. If we want to address the fentanyl problem, we should address the fentanyl problem. Most of the fentanyl crossing the border is carried by citizens. Over 90% of the interdictions of fentanyl are U.S. citizens carrying it. And they're carrying it over the ports of entry, not in places that are not ports of entry. So it doesn't make sense that if we wanted to address fentanyl, why does this bill say, let's look at the 10% place that is not the ports of entry and look at people who are not citizens, when it's citizens at ports of entry is where it's being brought up for the most part. So let's again, define the problem, then look for solutions. So fentanyl is a problem that we really need to work on. And that's why I support the $9 million investment that Governor Hobbs has championed to put money into local law enforcement at the border, and a variety of other measures that will actually work. But detaining somebody, Prop 314 is largely a racial profiling incentive, because it says you can pull somebody over basically to check to see, did you cross the border illegally? I kind of think you did. And there's nothing that you can do to stop them, because even though if it is racial profiling, there's a get out of jail free card in that bill that says law enforcement would be immune. Now, I know most law enforcement officers are not going to do that. They're not going to racial profile, but there will be some, because there were way too many after Senate Bill 1070 was passed. And it's heartbreaking to hear how demeaning it was for people. State Senator Rosanna Gabaldon was pulled over a dozen times in a year for no reason whatsoever. And they asked her, are you supposed to be here? So Prop 314 is a racial profiling incentive. It was written very badly, and my Republican colleagues did not listen to our side of the aisle at all. And that's why it is far too extreme for Arizona. We have problems. We must address them. I'm on board to take steps that will actually work and not push racial profiling.
Ms. Fassini, I want to go to you. Do the means justify the ends in this situation?
That's a really good way. Thank you so much, Joseph, for putting it like that. No, they don't. And here's why. Laken Riley, a young woman in her prime, brutally murdered. Matthew Carney, a beloved restaurant owner in Nashville, killed by hit and run from an illegal immigrant in Mexico, from Mexico. Scott Miller, a 64-year-old grandfather, mercilessly murdered by an illegal immigrant. Maria Gonzalez, a 12-year-old girl from Texas, suffered a tragic fate. And a 15-year-old disabled girl at a migrant hotel in Massachusetts, was raped by a Haitian migrant. Now, granted, this is very sad, and I tremble speaking their names. But guess what? They matter. And if someone is coming not through the port of entry, but if they are legally crossing into our border through any area other than the port of entry, and a police officer does happen to see that, not pulling them over in a car, okay, if they happen to see an illegal entry, what they can do is detain them. And if they have no warrants, if they have no drugs on them, and if there are no issues, they have an opportunity to go back, or they can be detained and held for a longer period of time. So when we talk about this bill, what we have to understand is we have a national crisis at our border. Lives are at stake. So if our local law enforcement is going to talk to someone about whether or not they came in through the border through the back door, I trust those local law enforcement officers. They're going to do the right thing. And whatever happened with SB 1070 and all of the upheaval, this is not SB 1070. This is laser focused on keeping our eye on keeping that border secure, not closed, secure.
Thank you very much. Senator Epstein, your party is often regarded as weak on immigration and is something that voters see as a problem in the upcoming election. I'm going to ask you bluntly, do you believe there is an immigration problem in Arizona?
Yes, there is a problem when there are actual problems caused by border problems. For instance, fentanyl coming across, guns coming across the border that are illegal is another problem. Crime is a problem. I understand that. What I dislike very intensely, however, is the rhetoric that is simply anti-immigrant. And that's what it has become. On the floor of the House, it became very clear that the rhetoric from the other side of the aisle was not just about keeping Arizonans safe. It was about saying outrageous things about all immigrants, people who were immigrated here decades ago. But because they were immigrants, the rhetoric is ridiculous about them. And we've got to stop that. In fact, in general, can I just say, I appreciate that my opponent generally is not a person basher, generally does not insult people. I appreciate that very much. However, I can't say the same for the people across the aisle at the state Senate. And in general, we just need to bring down the hate and show that we actually care for people. So are there immigration problems? There's many problems. One of the problems is families coming across the border because they've been subjected to heinous crimes in their own homelands, and they're just looking for safety. They're not trying to rip anybody off. And I want to share a few points that are important about crime that people are going to believe or not believe, but I'm looking at studies that show that violent crime has declined or remained flat every year of the Biden administration. The last time violent crime increased on an annual basis was 2020, when homicides spiked, and that was perhaps more because of the pandemic than Trump's presidency, but that's when it was. There was a study that was done in Texas of 14 counties right at the border, where if migrant crime is the problem, you would expect crimes would be much worse right there at the border, but they were not. And that was true year over year. And the trend was that generally undocumented immigrants in particular are significantly less likely to commit crimes than American citizens.
I'm going to stop you right there. Thank you so much. This dips into my last question on this. We've exactly what you're talking about. We've recently seen casting dispersions and racist rhetoric around immigrant communities across America, most recently with the Arizona GOP putting up a billboard saying "Eat less kittens, vote GOP," in allusion to the incorrect allegations made against Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. For Ms. Vicini, do you denounce your party leader's rhetoric around immigrants?
That is the first I have heard of that. So where I come from, I treat people the way I would like to be treated. And I have not seen that firsthand, therefore I cannot speak to that. But I denounce anyone who speaks to anyone in an improper fashion. Because, you know, running for state senate has taught me a lot. I'm learning a lot. But regardless of what I might be learning, people look up to candidates. They look up to Mitzi. They look up to the senators. So if you're speaking in that fashion and you're putting anyone down for any reason, I do not align with that. I am very straightforward. I'm very matter of fact. I say thank you and please, and that's it. And when it comes to emotions and feelings, I do my very best to take the high road.
Thank you very much. I want to move over to abortion, a very heated topic right now. The U.S. Supreme Court has overturned the Roe v. Wade precedent on abortion access this week. The 1864 abortion ban has been lifted, and the 15-week ban continues. For Ms. Vicini, in what situations, if any, do you believe abortions should be legal? You have, for rape and incest, health of the mother, you have 2 bits.
Thank you. So this is a very hard position for all of us. But I will say that I am very firm. I don't like any abortions, none. But I do understand that there will be instances where an abortion may be needed. Yes, we would need to have an abortion to save the life of a mother. And I know that in the state of Arizona, we currently have a law that supports 15 weeks for a woman to have an abortion. Now, I've thought about this long and hard. I, too, have gotten pregnant and had an ectopic pregnancy. And unfortunately for me, I don't have any children after that. So when we talk about this subject, it's extremely personal to me. And I say this, we have a lower birth decline that's happening across the United States and the globe. So the birth rates are declining, and we are continuing to push abortion past what I feel is a reasonable and moderate time frame. We need to be responsible as adults, and we need to be accountable for our actions. And sometimes there will be a consequence. Now, just because you're pregnant does not mean that you have to have the abortion. You can certainly have you carry the baby to term, and then you could give the baby up for adoption. But that isn't always the case. I do side with victims. I am an advocate for victims of domestic abuse and all kinds of victims. So I feel very strongly. And yes, if there is an instance of rape or incest in our community, feels that we want to have that in our law and we want to allow for that, I would support that. That would have to be an initiative from our voters. As it stands right now, I support the current law, and I would like to see it remain intact, because finally, Prop 139 goes up until birth, and people are not recognizing that. And I'm going to reiterate that. It's not at 24 weeks of viability. There's nowhere in there in the prop that says that. So that is a very dangerous place to be. And I don't agree with that.
Thank you very much. Senator Epstein, what parameters to abortions, if any, do you believe could be justified?
As you may know, in the legislature, as the Senate Democratic Caucus leader, I led the effort to repeal the horrible near total ban on abortion that was made law in 1864. This was before women could vote, when it was okay to marry a 10-year-old little girl. And I was appalled that nearly every Republican lawmaker voted to keep that full, complete ban on our bodies. They voted to keep that ban. Access to abortion health care and a right to contraception are fundamental rights and fundamental freedoms to choose one's life outcomes, and we need to protect these rights. We also need to codify this freedom into our Arizona Constitution, because if we do not have the right to abortion access in the Constitution, these Republican lawmakers will continue to oppress our rights to choose this vital health care. The current law is currently leaving emergency room physicians wondering, what do I do? It is time to take care of this woman's health. They have said over and over, our job is to present medical realities to the patient and let the patient decide what to do. But instead, we have politicians in that room with them, putting their noses into it. And this is not where government belongs. It is such a personal decision those are the only ones there. And we've got to give our women who are bleeding and showing up to emergency rooms because it's past the 15th week, and help doctors and women to know you can get the care you need. You don't have to be nearly dead, because that's what they're being told right now. Go back, bleed a little more. When you're nearly dead, then I can save your life. That's wrong. That's as wrong can be. So the constitutional amendment that is on your ballot on Prop 139, that's the way to go. If we don't have this right in the Constitution, we don't have this right, because our Republican colleagues will never stop trying to take it away from us. They were in favor of that 1864 nearly total ban on abortion.
Thank you very much. I'm going to shift over to jobs and I'm sorry, did you, Ms. Vicini, did you want to respond to that?
Yep, real quick comment. I just don't understand where we're coming out with the 15 weeks and a woman being sick and going to the hospital. If the woman goes in the hospital and her life is being threatened, then there will be an abortion performed. It is not going to look at the 15, 16, 17 weeks, because the woman's life is at risk. And I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
If I may, that's not true. Talk to physicians, talk to women. You're wrong.
Okay, all right. We'll go ahead and move on to jobs and the economy, because it's a consistent worry for voters in Arizona. Recent Fed data shows that we have the strongest economy we've had in decades. Stock market prices are booming. Companies are seeing record profits. And yet in Arizona, inflation is higher than any other state. Housing prices are that to which it's unaffordable for newcomers coming and first-time home buyers. I apologize. And the general cost of living in your district is increasing. For both of you, housing prices have increased considerably, which was once known for, the state was once known for its affordability. What is your plan for improving housing affordability in your district? Senator Epstein, I'll let you go first, and Mr. Sneed can have the last point on it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So it's an enormous task to figure out what do we do about affordable housing and accessibility to housing. And it's a worthy one that our Democratic caucus has taken on as a top priority. I established the Housing Work Group, and the leaders of that group have explored many potential solutions. We've passed laws to make it easier to build a casita as an additional dwelling on your property, and we've made it easier to build duplexes and triplexes in neighborhoods. That they are the missing middle that is so important to make housing more affordable. And I support counting and expanding the Arizona LIHTC program. It's a very tight program that provides tax credits to build housing, and no credits are distributed until after the people have proven that they're actually low-income people living in those units. I led the effort to start the Arizona LIHTC program when I served in the House of Representatives, and I support continuing it and expanding it. It works. So we should repeal the state ban on allowing cities to require part of the new housing construction to be dedicated to low-income residents. We can certainly do a lot more on it. And I believe that setting up a housing work group, or perhaps a committee devoted to housing and devoted to how our courts are treating people who are getting evicted, to help them to keep their home, because if you can keep your home, you can keep your job. And that's terribly important for everybody. So we have actually, our Democratic caucus has a full plan in place for potential solutions, and we are really hoping for a Democratic majority so that we can explore all of the solutions, not this narrow path that we've been hemmed in by our Republican majority so far.
Ms. Bassini.
In the past 7 years alone, the rents have gone up over 50%. So I totally understand that we are in a serious crisis. Other factors that cause housing unaffordability are local regulatory barriers, which experts do agree are largely to blame. We absolutely need to implement a quick process to approve or deny building permits. We need zoning reform, for the zoning restrictions and the ordinances that currently are in effect. But these are restrictions, along with Arizona's population growth, have created scarcity in the housing market, and Arizona's housing shortage has been exacerbated by an influx of residents from California and other states. But most importantly, and I cannot stress this enough, Arizona is a border state. So the federal government has allowed an overwhelming surge of migrants to come through the border with their open border policies, which is causing further discourse in housing and affordability. That has caused a drain on our resources and has gone way past the point of containment. So I can speak to a few solutions that I have researched. For example, one in Montana, they passed a suite of reforms, building duplexes, apartments near businesses, accessory dwelling units, like Mitzi had mentioned, and they're also building in their backyards. Washington State also passed similar reforms. Houston took a slightly different approach where they just minimized their lot sizes. But in these states, these efforts were bipartisan, and lawmakers recognized that the communities needed state-level help, and they have provided that to them. So there's strong evidence that these reforms work, from accessory units from Gainesville, Florida to Anchorage, Alaska, and they typically rent for less than studio apartments and are often affordable to lower income residents. So those are some of the programs that we can take a line to and actually imitate some of these other states and make housing more affordable.
Thank you very much, you both. Question again for you both. Gas prices have started to come down, but are still high for many households. And Clean Elections survey respondents said this was a major concern for them. What is your plan for the state to address this issue? Ms. Bassini, I'll let you go with that one first.
When it comes to gas prices, a state senator does not have a lot of wiggle room. This is not an issue that we can make a large impact. Although I wish it were, I really do. I would love for all of our gas prices to be affordable. So I will say the only gas tax that I can really speak to would be one that we currently have for the state of Arizona. The gas sales tax is there to repair roads, bridges, transportation, highways, and whatever is needed. But I don't want to do anything with that tax because we need that revenue in order to rebuild our roads. So when it comes to gas prices, I align with everyone here and anyone out there who's facing these issues. But I do say one final piece to this puzzle. If we can start to secure our border and get some of our resources back into our pocket and get our communities thriving again, which I know we can do. Arizona is a beautiful state, and we have a lot of beautiful parks and landscapes that people like to come, and tourism. We need to do better here in Arizona. And by securing our border, it will help other businesses come to our state. They don't want to come now when they see all these problems at the border. So these are some of the ways that we can help, but direct gas prices, we really cannot affect. So I totally understand where we're at with that, but it's just another cog in the wheel of our federal government and how Brent crude pricing and these high levels are set, and the average driver really doesn't have a lot of control over it. We just got to keep paying.
Senator Epstein, do you want to add on to that at all?
We agree. There's not a whole lot that the state legislature can do about gas prices. And, my Republican colleagues took a swing at it, a great big swing and a miss last session when they tried to create that they would force the oil refineries, force Arizona's mix of what goes into our oil to be changed, or give a menu of different chemistry options there. And I spoke with the petroleum industry, I spoke with chemists, I spoke with so many people who just said, you know what? Warren Peterson really is not qualified to choose what should go in your gasoline. So let's leave that to the Department of Environmental Quality and the people who know what they're doing, and let's let the market take care of this. But this is a bigger issue. It is more of a federal issue. I know the Biden administration is working on it always. It's top of mind. Gasoline prices matter for everything we do.
Thank you very much to you both. The last issue tonight is going to be around transparency and cross-party collaboration. The first question I have is actually from a viewer tonight. It's actually from an earlier portion, but I'm going to try to bring it into this. Independents are equally represented across the state between Democrats, representative, and independents, about a 30-30-30-30 split across the state. How do we get more of them in the legislature to make our state legislature more representative of what politics actually look like in Arizona? Senator, I'll let you actually start with that first.
Well, the first thing we might consider doing is turning the job of legislator to be more of the professional job that it is. It probably should pay, and I would hope to work on this after I leave the legislature, because I don't want people to think I'm doing it for myself. But $24,000 a year is a ridiculously low amount of money to try to recruit people of any stripe to come to the legislature. And I also have felt for quite some time that 4-year terms would be better, regardless of, I thought that my seatmate, Jill Norgard, when she was in the legislature, she also would have done better work with a 4-year term than with a 2-year term, because going out and installing street signs on intersections is not helping the people of Arizona. But reaching out to the people, as I do so often, I'm constantly reaching out. I hold forums. I go to where people are. I go to schools. I listen to people. I'm out on the soccer fields. I'm in the parks, listening to people. That's the work I want to do to help solve problems for the people of Arizona. And that's the kind of outreach you need to do. So we really should start to look at the job of legislator. And I'd like to see requirements come along with better pay so that we can recruit more people to want to do this job. And we probably should look into a way to make it more fair to get your name on the ballot. Right now, an independent needs like 3 times as many signatures as somebody in a party. And I don't know that that's fair. So there's definitely some room for improvement in helping to bring that independent voice. But I'll tell you what, my number one priority is to uplift the integrity of the institution overall, the state legislature, because that's the only way we can make the improvements we need in the economy, education systems, health, housing, water, and border security for that matter. We need for people to come to testify, because folks, we can't do this job without you. We've got to hear from you. And I want to make sure that nobody fears going in to testify in a committee, as has happened in recent years with a Republican majority. Nobody should be ousted from a committee room because the chair doesn't like what the person just testified. We've got to stop that. And we really want to make sure that decorum on the floor is a matter of speaking in a way that is not just standing up and ranting about somebody on the left or somebody on the right is eating puppies and cats. Let's stop saying those things.
All right. Ms. Fassini, what are your thoughts about independents being equally represented in the legislature, the fact that they are equally represented in the voting block why aren't they represented equally in the legislature? What would you do to make sure that they have an equal voice in the state politics?
Thank you so much for that question. I believe 100% in being fair. I don't understand the reason why they are not. And if I were to have to support that measure, I would absolutely support that measure. I think it should be all fair. It should be equal between all parties. I think that, and I will say this even for my race, people are intimidated. People are scared. People don't have true grit and fortitude that it takes, like Mitzi and myself, to run for these offices. This is not an easy task. So I will say, they know that. I know that. But it didn't stop me from doing what I wanted to do for our community to make our communities better. I wanted to change the future for our children because I see this turning a very dark days ahead for them. But at the end of the day, I'm always fair and I always listen to all sides. That doesn't mean that we will always agree. But in this particular question, I think it's very important that we have independents. Our independents are 1/3 of our district, and they matter just as much as the Republicans and the Democrats. And I love to hear what they have to say. And a lot of times I align with their ideologies. So I think it's a great thing to put forward. It's an interesting measure. It should have already been in place if you were to ask me, and I will support it.
Thank you both. Last question before we move on to the House candidates. Voters from both parties told a Clean Elections survey that they want their lawmakers to work with people across the aisle to find solutions. Famously, in past legislatures, there were lawmakers who said that they only represent the people who voted for them. Do you believe that this is your job to represent all your electorate? And if so, how would you go about finding allies in the other party who maybe didn't vote for you, or maybe don't represent, who maybe you don't necessarily represent? Senator Epstein, I'll let you go first, and then Ms. Fassini, I'll let you have the last word on it before we go to closing remarks. Senator Epstein?
I believe that I represent all 230,000 people of our district, whether they are voters or not, and whether they voted for me or not. That's why I have a very open door policy. That's why I chat with people from all stripes on my social media. I appreciate the several who are frequent talkers with me there. The outreach is really important, and I believe that I represent everybody. The working across the aisle is so important. I mentioned we did the bipartisan election bill. I've worked on unemployment insurance in a very bipartisan way. Republican Representative David Cook and I worked on that bill. We made it better for workers and for employers. I have worked on ongoing bills. I worked with former Republican Rep. Heather Carter on a bill to help for grants for people to help their seniors and people with disabilities to make modifications to their home, to stay in their homes. So many things that have been across the aisle. There's a lot of that going on. Not as much as there used to be, I'm going to be honest, but it's a great thing when it happens. And I really love it when we do that. We need to have that openness that we can find a better path and that the solution is stronger if we listen to more people.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fassini.
I align exactly with those similar principles. So running my campaign for the past year, I have talked to all voters, and I may not agree with each and every one of their issues, but I listen to their issues and I hear what they have to say, because it is not about me. It's about the voters. It's about their issues and their concerns. And in my platform, I'm standing to be their voice. I want to be their voice because our voices have been silenced. They are being silenced to a point where information is coming out and really nobody really can make sense of anything anymore. And they kind of want to just throw it all up in the air and not be involved in the process of elections, in electing our leaders. And that affects our communities and our futures. So I say I get along very well with independents. I get along, obviously, with Republicans. And believe it or not, I get along very well with Democrats also. I haven't had any problems with any Democrats. I listen to what they have to say. I keep an open ear. And in some cases, they would like to vote for me anyway. So with that being said, I think that I'm able to come together in a moderate way where I can listen to all parties and still in turn compromise their issues and then find a solution that works for all of us.
Wonderful. Thank you both. We are going to have our closing remarks. As I mentioned, you both get 1 minute to make your closing statements. The first closing statement will be given to Ms. Bassini.
Thank you. Thank you again to the Clean Elections for having me here this evening. As I stated earlier tonight, we've heard some of the same empty promises and excuses that we always get from established Democrats that have led us to higher costs, weaker borders, drug and human smuggling, not to mention an election system that we, the people, don't trust. They promise change and a brighter future, but they really don't have any answers or real solutions. Arizona deserves better. I'm running to restore common sense government and the prosperity that we expect for ourselves and our future generations. My campaign is a movement for the disaffected Arizonan who just wants to see common sense legislation in Phoenix and Arizona. There are ways to get Arizona back on track. And let's start by bridging the divide between the Republican and Democratic Party so that together we can implement effective legislation that is helpful and resourceful for the people of Arizona. And if you're eligible, I encourage you to join with me for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Epstein.
I would encourage everybody to take a look at our blue ballot guide that is on the LD12 website, a Democrats website. That's azld12democrats.org. We have our suggestions for the propositions and a number of candidates, including those who might not have a Republican or Democratic indication on their name, but these are people who we feel are going to be very supportive of our public schools, recognize that water should be for everybody, not just for the person who has the money to pay the most. We need to make sure, we didn't talk about water, but it's terribly important. And our Democratic caucus is very dedicated to the idea of water has to be there for everybody. It has to be sustainable. And letting a Saudi Arabian farm come in and mine it out from underground and then it's gone, that's not sustainable. So we're looking for sustainability to keep Arizona a beautiful place for the people who are here now. And as well as welcoming our future workforce and our future Arizonans, is because we're a growing state. Everybody wants to be here. It's gorgeous. So I hope you'll look at the azld12democrats.org. My website is still mitziepstein.com. You know me. I've been your state representative. I've been out on soccer fields with you for years. I've coached many of your kids. I've run PTA meetings at the schools with you. I've been out there listening to you for so many years to hear what's important to you. And I recently just helped a group of small businesses to cut the red tape at the Department of Administration and help their businesses to thrive. I'm listening to all the folks in our district and helping to listen to define the problem and then bring in as many voices as we need to make it a really strong solution that will work for everybody. So I'm working on, in a collaborative way, to across the aisle, yes, across the whole district, to make sure that we're building strong solutions and working with and developing Arizona's strengths. So thanks, and everybody be sure to vote. In fact, you might want to go to Be Ballot Ready at the end of this event, beballotready.vote, and check your registration to make sure that you are fully ready to vote.
Thank you very much to the Senate candidates for debating. We appreciate your participation. We will now take a quick break before we transition over to the House candidates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the LD12 Clean Elections Commission's debates. We are here with candidates for House of Representatives for Legislative District 12, where voters get to cast their choice for two candidates. In the room with us, we have incumbent Democrats Patty Contreras and Stacey Travers, and their competitor Republican Lawrence Hudson. Just like in our Senate debates, the order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting with their opening comments. Closing comments will go in reverse order. A reminder for people watching from home that if you do have a question, you can submit them to any of the channels you see at the bottom of the screen, including email at debates@kc-a.com. You can text us at 408-840-8350, or you can call us at 480-937-1253. Representative Contreras, will you start the opening remarks, please? You have 1 minute.
Great, thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Joseph, and the Clean Elections Commission for the opportunity to participate in this debate. So I'm Representative Patty Contreras. I was elected in 2022, so this is my first term serving as your state representative. In the House, I'm on the Health and Human Services Committee, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and also during this session, I was appointed to the Ethics Committee. I was also recently appointed to the Vulnerable Adults Study Committee, which I'm very happy to have been put on that. And also this year, I served on the Appropriations Committee as a substitute during budget negotiations. So I stayed pretty busy at the House. A little bit about me. I'm a third generation native Arizonan, originally from the Yuma area. I've lived in Phoenix for over 40 years and here in my house in Ahwatukee for over 30 years. I retired in 2021 from the city of Phoenix after a 31-year career with the Parks and Recreation Department and Human Services Departments. And I ran our senior centers, 8 of our 15 senior centers in the city of Phoenix. So some of my priorities, though, when I'm at the House and what I really want to work on is public education. I have 3 sisters who are in education, and it's important to me that we have fully funded public education system here in Arizona. I worked over 30 years working with our elders, with our seniors. So I'm very passionate about helping and protecting our seniors. And as a native Arizonan, as you heard earlier, it's a beautiful state and we want to, protect our resources here. I want to make sure that this state has clean air and water. So those are just a few of my priorities, and I look forward to this debate tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were going at 1:45, so I'll go ahead and Mr. Hudson, I'll give you minute 45 as well.
I don't need a minute 45, but I will say, Stacey, your hair looks nice. Last time I saw you, you were just out of the shower. I'm here tonight thanks to the Clean Elections Commission, who made it possible for me to run, so I thank you. I've never before sought public office. I'm doing it now because I'm convinced our elections no longer work and our governing class is no longer afraid of us voters, as they should be. We suffer endless wars, reckless spending, inflation, failing schools, and invasion by illegal immigrants as a direct consequence of the corruption of our elections. I believe we should conduct elections as we did in the recent past, voting at our precincts and only on election day. We must count the ballots by hand. These sacrifices are minor compared to the importance of restoring trust in our elections. In fact, I believe that returning control of elections from the government to the citizens will help restore civic life in our neighborhoods. Hand count is fun. It's the job of the state legislature to run our elections. It says so in the U.S. Constitution. They are wrong to delegate this authority to the Secretary of State and to the county reporters. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much. And to be clear, just to clear up any confusion, Ms. Travers was on this call beforehand with wet hair and she went to blow dry her hair. So to clear up any confusion. Representative Travers, you have a minute for your opening statement.
Yes, Lawrence, your earlier comment, I actually went and changed to look a bit more professional as well. So I hope you took notice. Excuse me, my name is Stacey Travers and I'm a candidate for State Representative District 12 for re-election. I sit on the Military Affairs and Public Safety Committee, the International Trade Committee, the Natural Resources, Energy and Water Committee, and the appointment to the Governor's Water Policy Council. 2 years ago, I wrote that we needed a common sense approach to governing. We needed to focus more on issues that bring us together, less on what issues divide us, and to meet the needs of all Arizonans by coming together. I have kept my word. In my first term, I've had more bills get to the governor's office signed into law, passed almost unanimously by both chambers, more than any other freshman in the minority party since 1990. I was born in Athens, Greece, to a U.S. military father and Greek mother, a family with a history of military service. I served our country proudly in the United States Army as a Russian intelligence operative. I earned my BS in geology at the University of Arizona, met my husband John when I was doing graduate school in the UK. I became an advocate for homeless and disabled veterans, a cause I'm still deeply committed to. I have 2 girls, and I love raising them in Arizona, a state that prides itself immensely on its fierce independence, love of country, and a strong sense of community.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go down the same basic line of questioning as far as subject topics. I'm going to start off with education, as we did before. Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship accounts, or ESAs, allow students to use taxpayer money that would ordinarily go to public schools to attend a private school instead. As mentioned before in the previous debate, these are incredibly controversial, as even this week we saw with ESAs being questioned if they could be used for flat earth curriculums. Another report had our education system ranked dead last in the nation. Now lawmakers passed legislation this year to open up ESAs to all 1.1 million students in Arizona, and education advocates are attempting to refer that law to the ballot, as they did with a similar law in 2018 that was resoundingly defeated at the ballot. I'm going to start first the question and pass it to Mr. Hudson. First, do you believe that the extension of ESAs should extend to all students? And if so, how do you explain the overwhelming vote to not do that in the last general election? You have 1 minute. I'm sorry, you have 2 minutes. I apologize.
I think ESAs are a wonderful idea. And I think it's great that the program is now universal. It started out as a program that was available only to students with disabilities, as I understand it. I don't understand the election result you refer to, and I'm not familiar with it. The ESA program saves the taxpayers money. If you look at any district school and you divide the total amount they spend by the number of students, you get a number close to $15,000. And if I take a student out of the district school system and give him $7,000, which is the typical award for the ESA, to go spend at a private school or a homeschool or whatever they decide to do, we save a lot of money. And there's $7 billion allocated to education in the state budget. We could cut that dramatically if we encouraged all those students to go the ESA route.
I want to pass over to Representative Contreras. What do you have in response to Mr. Hudson's analysis of the ESA program?
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, part of the problem is that not all the kids are coming from public schools and going into private schools. As a matter of fact, the large majority of the kids that are using the program since the universal expansion are kids who are coming from, or who are always in a private school. So they never had any impact on the school districts. So that's all new money. That's all money that's being taken out of our state budget and not being used for public funds for the public and all. So we originally had 12,000 students in our ESA program, and that cost us $196 million. Now we have 70,000 or so kids, and it's costing us $1 billion. You look at our state budget last year and this last year that we just approved, and what our deficit was, and it was like $1.4 billion. So we were really close to that $1.4 billion. If we didn't have the ESAs, universal ESAs, we could have covered a lot of that budget deficit and all. The other thing with that is that I have an issue with our ESAs is that we just, there's no accountability. We don't know how the kids are doing. We don't know what they're getting taught. You mentioned the flat earth curriculum. I can't, it's just even hard for me to imagine that this is the kind of the curriculum that these students are getting. We don't know if they're getting taught at all. A friend of mine told me that they saw a kid out roaming around the park in the middle of the day, and she asked them, aren't you supposed to be in school? And she says, oh no, I'm homeschooled. And this kid was out there by themselves, so I'm like, what are they being taught? Where's the accountability there? there's no audits of the money, how it's being used. I think AD Mays is trying to do some of that. We saw recently dune buggies being approved and then not approved again. So $900 Lego sets. I mean, it just blows my mind, the waste of this money. We really need to rein this in.
And to be clear, there is no actual evidence of a flat earth curriculum being used. The article that came out showed that there was a query of if a flat earth curriculum could be used in ESA program. But I want to go to Representative Travers. Do you think ESAs should be expanded in any kind of way? And if so, or if not, would you vote to eliminate the ESA program altogether if Democrats took control of the legislature?
So, thank you for the question. No, I don't think that the ESA voucher program should be expanded. We have seen, as you know, my colleague has noted, that we have a lot of the expansion is actually being used by zip codes that don't necessarily need the financial assistance, that have never had their children in public schools. So that money isn't being reallocated per student now into a public, from a public system into a private system. It was that child was never allocated that money in the public school system. Do I think we can, or should we eliminate it? I think it's really hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's out. Should we go ahead and use it for special needs kids as its original intent? Yes, most definitely. I actually have a special needs child, and this last couple of years have had a really difficult time, either through COVID. I decided that I was going to try to put her in an alternative school. I chose not to use ESAs. I paid for it privately, and that was a huge financial burden. And in the end, we chose to send her back into a public school because there's no, as my colleague said, there's no accountability. There's also no requirements on a private school taking a special needs kid that's on an ESA voucher. I think there was a little bit of a false flag that this was actually going to help lower income children get a better education. The fact is, we were, 49th rated in the United States for public schools. We continue to not fund them, and now we're rated 51 out of the state. So throwing money at the problem is actually helping us, is helping the solution, and keeping money away from it does not help it, as we've seen. So, like I said, it's very difficult with no accountability. And to speak to your point about the flat earth curriculum, there might not be actually somebody using a flat earth curriculum, but we do have evidence of parents purchasing items that are not necessarily part of quote unquote what would be considered part of a learning environment, that are actually going back creating curriculum to match the purchases, and not creating a curriculum and then purchasing the product based on the curriculum that they found. So there is a way to game the system without the lack of accountability. We've also just recently found, I think it was ProPublica or somebody that did a report, that ESA money is being hoarded. So you've got families, there are $360 million right now that were applied for and meant to be utilized for ESA that did not get utilized, that are just sitting in bank accounts now, because a lot of the times if you have more than one child and you're getting ESA vouchers for them, you're not purchasing new items. What you're doing is you're handing down to the next child. And so this money that
I want to cut you off because you're at 3 minutes already.
No, please do. Thank you. I could go on.
Representative Contreras, do you know how much teachers are paid in your district, and is it enough? Why or why not?
I don't know the exact amount that they're paid, but I know that we are very, very low in the state as far as our teacher funding and all. Let's see, I think I saw somewhere where that we're 32nd in the country for average teacher pay, which is about $60,000 and all. And that's, 32nd, that's the bottom half. And all. We really need to improve that so that families can have a living wage, that they can live on it. My sister's a teacher here, and she just retired, but she's a teacher here in Arizona. And it was hard for her, even though her husband worked, to actually be able to afford her 2 kids and her housing and getting everything done that they want to do. So, and and teacher pay has not kept up with inflation either. You know, we do add a little bit every year, but it's not enough. You know, we have inflation, so they're actually making less than they made 10 years ago. So it's really something that we really need to take a look at. You know, and there's a range, of course. You know, teachers who have been here a long time get paid a little bit more, and all beginning teachers get paid like something like 40,000, which is, you know, you talk minimum wage is 30,000. So that's if you're doing full time. So that's not very much above that. So I think we definitely need to improve our teacher pay so that we can keep them and get better and get our teachers here in Arizona.
I want to go to Mr. Hudson on that. Do you believe teachers are paid enough? And if not, would you raise taxes to pay them better, or would you find another way?
Well, one of the blessings of the COVID affair is that parents got to see what was going on inside these classrooms. And I think that's why so many of them want out of the district school system and into something that actually educates their kids. I mean, Patty and Stacey, you talk about lack of accountability. The only person who really should be the judge of the accountability is the parent. You know, these families pay thousands of dollars in taxes at every level, and they're offered, you know, free education only with the district school system. You know, the Arizona tax credit idea was that was the beginning of a lot of this, that you could take your tax money, which is allocated, you know, by the legislature, and allocate it yourself. And if it's important to you to send your kids to a private school, you use the program to do that. I don't think there's a higher level of accountability than the parents, and I frankly don't. Joseph, you said that the flat Earth thing is not really true. So I'd hate to base any kind of policy on that. I don't believe parents would do that to their kids.
I do want to just go kind of go back though. I did ask about teacher pay though. I asked, do you believe teachers are paid enough? Do you know how much teachers are paid in your district, and if they should be paid more, how would you pay them better?
I think that good teachers, I mean, if there were an actual free market in pay, good teachers would probably be paid a lot more than they are on average right now. I think there are a lot of teachers who are not very good and should drop out of the profession and go find something else to do. But we don't really have a free market in that right now. And a lot of the money that's being poured into the district school system is going for administrator salaries anyway, not to teachers.
Thank you. Representative Travers, do you believe raising taxes is the best way to pay teachers better?
No. But we need to go ahead and utilize the mechanisms that we already have in place legislatively to raise teacher pay. It hasn't been addressed for years. The funding mechanism that we use at the legislature. And so we need to take a look at it. We need to make sure that it rises with inflation. We need to make sure that we are paying teachers a living wage, so that they don't need to go to the stores and buy materials out of their own pockets, which they are doing. The constant revolving door of fundraisers at my school show that they are not being funded appropriately for even some of their basic needs. So I think, to answer your question, I don't think they're being paid appropriately. And I think we need to look at the legislature and its funding mechanisms to make sure that we can create a commiserate salary for our teachers in the state of Arizona.
Thank you very much, all. I'm going to move over to immigration, but before we do, I just want to remind people watching from home that if you do have a question, you can submit them to any of the channels you see at the bottom of the screen, including email, debates@kc-a.com. You can text us at 408-840-8350. You can call us at 480-937-1253. I'm going to propose a question to you that I also proposed to the Senate candidates. Prop 314 has been called by many as SB 1072.0, the former Arizona state bill that has resulted in hundreds of millions of state dollars going to settlement and court fees. It's been described as racist, xenophobic, and a knee-jerk reaction to a more complicated problem. My first question on this for all of you is, what will happen to your community if American citizens are wrongfully detained, and how is that detention justifiable in order to curb illegal migration. Mr. Hudson, I'll let you go first.
Well, a crime is being committed when these people cross the border without going through the proper immigration system. And, you know, the problem we have widespread in society is that we have rules, and, you know, the Article 2 branch of the government often decides that prosecutorial discretion gives them the right not to enforce the rules. So, you know, maybe we have too many rules, but we do have an immigration system, and it's not being honored right now. We have people in the country who are not here legally, and I don't know how, you know, I would personally prefer to make it very hard for them to get work. That might be a more effective way of getting them to leave. We have an obligation to feed and shelter them, but we don't have an obligation to let them into the country. And, you know, what Arizona can do on its own is kind of limited until we have a wall built.
Mr. Hudson, I just want to go back, though, because the question was about American citizens being detained. Do you believe that American citizens that are wrongfully detained, it's justifiable in order to curb illegal migration?
I have no experience of that. If somebody detained me, I guess I'm reasonably confident I could explain why I'm here. I'm not, you know, it's not a big worry of mine.
Representative Contreras, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, as a person of color, this really, you know, affects me, my family, and my community. And I really think that racial profiling has happened, happens, and will more than likely happen with this bill if it gets passed, with this proposition if it gets passed. We saw it 10, 12 years ago with SB 1070. We're still paying millions of dollars for Sheriff Arpaio and the way he profiled folks out in our communities, American citizens, not immigrants, American citizens, and they were profiled, they were stopped, they were, you know, put in jail, and that's just not right. You know, I think I'm a definite no, obviously, on Prop 314. But you know, trying to do that, getting that passed would just hurt our economy, hurt our businesses, hurt our families here, and it's a bad idea.
Thank you very much, Representative Travers. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, we've heard elected leaders say that this is a real problem and that their hands are tied, and that wrongful detention sometimes is a justifiable means to a real end. What are your thoughts?
So a couple of things. First of all, this is a federal issue. Justice Scalia ruled years ago that this was under a federal purview. And having said that, to my respected opponent, on what he said, I guess to some degree that's the whole point. You and I, the number one illegal immigration in the United States are visa overstays. So I could be coming from Greece or England or anywhere and just stay and be legal and live somewhere. And the chances are of me getting stopped and asked to show my citizenship or my papers are marginally are lower than somebody of color. And so that's where we get the racial profiling. You said it yourself. Chances are you probably wouldn't be stopped because you don't look as somebody that we think would be illegal. And so the chances are, if we're talking about 314, it'll be ruled unconstitutional anyway, as the original 1070 was, because it's a violation of civil rights amongst many other violations. I think that immigrants, that we are built on a tapestry of a cultural enrichment from many different countries with many different languages and many different beliefs, and that is our strength. The fact that we are in our non-homogeneous nature, homogeneous is what makes us unique to any other country on the planet. And immigrants have a history of providing so much to the workforce, to our cultural fabric, to the enrichment of who we are, that that it's something that's legislation like this only would seek to hurt us and to hurt our community. We've seen what happened in Missouri when somebody very falsely claimed that legal temporary workers from Haiti were eating dogs and cats. And it's just an awful, it's just an awful trope. It's bigoted, and it's basically, ripped apart that city. We've had white supremacists come in, whether they've been invited by others or not, and it does nothing for who we are as a community.
I want to go to Mr. Hudson on this because you did point out to him and his point. I want you to go ahead and respond back to Representative Travers on this. You did mention that, if you were to ever be stopped and, detained, that you'd be able to kind of justify your position on where you were. I'm wondering that, considering the fact that most drug smuggling has been done among American citizens at legal border crossings, is this a solution that needs to be could be mended other ways, or do you think that this is the only way to really solve for this? So this is the prime way to solve for this?
We're referring to Proposition 314 again?
Correct. Yes.
Well, honestly, I think the legislature has done us no favors with these propositions. There's a whole bunch of them this year, and I find them mostly poorly thought out, poorly worded. And it occurs to me that the real purpose of putting all those propositions in the ballot is to force the ballot to go to two separate pieces of paper, front and back, just to punish the people who want to vote on election day. It's going to be tough to research all these things. And even if you research them, they're very, very difficult. I mean, as I said earlier, I think without the cooperation of the federal government, which we certainly don't have, because the federal government has effectively erased the border, there's very little a state like Arizona can do. I'd like to see us make it harder to employ people who are not here legally. I certainly wish them no harm, but they've broken the law, and our country is founded on the notion that we're all created equal and we get our rights from God and not from the government. And in theory, the education system is supposed to train our citizens in believing that as well, and it's not doing that. And we're also letting all these people across the border have no stake in America that I believe in. And that's bad for the country, I think.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to move on to a question from viewers. This question for everybody: what is your position on ICE and CBP and their future role at the southern border? I'll go ahead and start with you, Representative Travers, and then I'll go to Representative Travers and finish with Mr. Hudson. Representative Travers?
Can you repeat the question again?
What is your position on ICE and Customs and Border Protection and their future role at the southern border?
Well, I mean, I think we definitely need some entity that, for ICE or, any kind of immigration at the airports, or I don't necessarily think that they should be judge and jury. And I think they have too much power. And I think we need to have more of a judicial process that allows people, a fair and equitable opportunity to enter the country legally. I think they're under supported. I think we need more. I think everybody can agree that there is an issue with immigration at the border. It's, how we deal with it. Again, it's a federal issue. There was a bill in Washington, D.C. that allocated funding for more judges, for more technology at the border to help mitigate some of the issues that people feel are happening at the border. And that was basically Donald Trump calling Washington, D.C. and telling them to kill the bill. And I know that we have resources right now at the border, for example, technology, magnetometers, drones and things, that we don't have the money allocated from the bill to actually put in place. So they're there not being installed. So, do ICE, do Border Police Do they need Border Patrol? Do they need the resources to help them do their jobs better? Yes. That's not something the state does, although Governor Hobbs does have a very small allocation in her budget for sort of state border assistance. But ultimately, it's the federal jobs. I mean, we need to realize that right now our state is in a deficit. And our state is in a deficit primarily because the Republican Party last year basically whittled away over $1 billion in things like $15 million rodeo day expansions and $11 million brackish water study committees, where we could have been using it for other resources. And a lot of what these ballot measures do, I agree with my opponent, Mr. Hudson. Those are all bills that failed the legislature. And they went intentionally around the governor so that they could get onto ballot measures. And most of these are either unfunded mandates or they have unintended consequences. So I agree. There's one thing I agree on is that they are poorly worded, they are poorly thought out, and they will have huge consequences, both financially and morally, on the state of Arizona and Arizonans.
Representative Contreras, I to kind of go on top of that. I mean, I wonder, what do you say to voters who believe that the state needs more CBP and ICE at the border, and who argue that the state doesn't hold people accountable who migrate here legally? What do you say to those people?
Well, the state does take care of those folks. I mean, I'm from a border town down by Yuma and all, and if you go down there, you'll see a huge tent. I mean, it's huge. I wouldn't even call it a tent. I don't know what you would call it. Facility where they process these folks coming through, and a lot of them are seeking asylum, which is legal to do. They can seek asylum and claim asylum and live here, legally until they can get their papers taken care of and all. And the folks who they do catch that are here coming in, maybe brought in by coyotes or something like that, are sent back and all. So there is a process in place for this. Some of our border towns are the safest towns, in the state and all. And and you don't hear about that. You hear about all these murders, and with the other candidate for the Senate mentioned was all these other places around the country and incidents that happen, and we're not seeing a lot of that here. It's hyperbole. It's rhetoric about our immigrants that are here. If we push back on, I hope we push back on this proposition. Again, it's going to hurt our economy. Proposition 314 has been, our chambers of commerce are against it. There's businesses against it. Our communities of faith are against it. Like we mentioned earlier, the racial profiling is going to increase, and we don't want to see that. And the other part of this too is that there's no funding in this, and that's part of it being unconstitutional also, because we're supposed to provide funding whenever we mandate something. And here we are asking our border communities to interdict, and it's not their job. And we want them to capture these folks and put them somewhere, but not give them any money, not give them any resources. I think that, yes, we need to improve our border patrol. Like Representative Travers mentioned, there was something in place that Trump
I'm going to cut you off.
told us not to use, and it's yeah. Sorry,
Mr. Hudson, I'm going to give you 1 minute to respond.
Well, we've got immigration laws, and we've got to enforce them, and ICE and CBP are an essential part of that. Whatever it costs to give those people the resources they need to enforce the immigration laws is what we need to spend. And I just gave you an idea in the last segment about how we can save $2 billion out of the education budget by sending all those kids into ESA programs. So if you want to use that idea, I'll say it was yours in the first place.
I'm going to pivot the conversation over to abortion access now. The U.S. Supreme Court has overturned the Roe v. Wade precedent on abortion access this week. The 1864 ban is lifted and the 15-week ban continues. For Mr. Hudson, I have a follow-up depending on the answer. If I could get just a yes or no right now. Do you support the abortion access initiative that will be on the ballot this November that would enshrine the right to an abortion in the Arizona?
You're talking about Proposition 139?
Yes.
No, I plan to vote against it.
As the only male running in this race, why do you believe it's appropriate to legislate what a woman does with her own body?
I think there are two bodies involved. I mean, there's the woman's body and then there's the body of the child.
For Representatives Travers and Contreras, what parameters to abortion? Well, actually, first off, I'll let you go ahead and respond to Mr. Hudson's comment. Representative Contreras?
Did you say me? I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry.
Women should have their own right to their bodies to determine their medical care, and women and their doctors or their loved ones should have those rights to do that. There are no laws out there that tell men how to run their body, what their medical care has to be or could be or should be. And I think it's wrong that we have these laws that are dictating how women should have medical care. And this is something that should be that woman's right, and the rights and have government stay out of the medical office, have the government stay out of the hospital, and allow women to make those choices on their own.
Representative Travers, what parameters to abortions, if any, do you believe could be justified?
I don't think that there should be any restrictions, because your body cannot dictate when something will happen and when an emergency will be required. I was pregnant 3 times. I lost my first child at 24 weeks. I delivered her stillborn. I had my second pregnancy at 32 weeks after staying in the hospital for 8 weeks. She was delivered emergency C-section. And then my last child at 35 weeks was delivered C-section after my uterus had ripped in half. And only because I was at the hospital, I was able to be saved. I was rushed into the emergency room. They found her floating in my hemorrhage. Had we decided to go home that day after I had started contracting because I was dehydrated, we both would have been dead. So that didn't happen before 6 weeks. It didn't happen before 15 weeks. And we've seen with Amber Thurman in Georgia, who was pregnant just after 6 weeks. She was 7 weeks pregnant. Georgia didn't allow her to have a termination of a pregnancy. She went to another state. The job wasn't completed. She had some complications. She ended up going to a hospital in Georgia. She ended up going 2 to 3 times to a hospital where they wouldn't treat her. She had to wait 20 hours after she had gone septic to actually be administered into the hospital where she was treated, because healthcare professionals were too scared to treat her because they were afraid of the criminal implications of the law that we had put in place. She actually also had a 6-year-old son who now has no mother. So do I believe that women should be able to choose? I take your point that there is another life, but at what expense? The fact that we have to be almost dying before we can actually be looked at and treated. My first pregnancy, I waited over 14 hours after I started cramping, to the point where I had to crawl into a taxi and ask to go to the hospital. And at that point, I had a placental abruption and we lost her oxygen. And that's when I delivered her stillborn. Nobody should have to go through that. It should be between your religious provider. It should be between your doctor. It should be between your husband, your spouse, your partner, whoever that is, who should be making that decision. Government has no business being in anybody's reproductive healthcare decisions. And whether that's IVF, whether that's contraception, whether that's pregnancy terminations, no business.
Mr. Hudson, whenever abortion comes to a state vote, it overwhelmingly gets shot down in favor of Democrats. This is not a subject that Republicans often have been consistently winning on. Is this a subject that you would advise your party to back off on if elected and a bill came for your support?
Well, we live in the city of man, and things are imperfect here. You know, if the choice is served up, you know, a limit of 15 weeks versus essentially unlimited abortion right up to birth, which I think is what Proposition 139 would permit, it's easy for me to choose 15 weeks.
But that 15 weeks doesn't include rape or incest the way that it's currently written in statute.
Any response to that, Mr. Hudson?
Not sure what you want me to say there.
Well, do you believe that there should be an exception to rape, incest?
I don't think the child should be punished for what the parents did. I'm sorry, I'm sorry what happened to you, Stacey. I think I understand that you were badly treated, and I suspect that the solution is probably already in existing laws. I don't know any doctor who would save the baby and sacrifice the mother. I'm appalled by the story you're telling.
But what about the 6-year-old boy whose mother died because she couldn't be treated because of Georgia laws? Are we not punishing him by denying him the right to have his mother for the rest of his life?
And to be clear, Georgia's laws are incredibly strict and not the same as Arizona's laws, just to be clear for the audience watching. So actually, just to not veer off the subject here.
I know nothing about
the situation, Joseph, this situation could have been the same at 15 weeks. I mean, that's the point.
I don't know any doctor who would save a baby at the cost of the mother's life. That's the way I think the system is meant to work. And if you find an exception, that doctor is breaking his oath. He can't do things like that ethically.
Great. We're going to move over to jobs in the economy, which is a consistent worry for voters in Arizona. Recent federal data shows that we have the strongest economy we've had in decades. Stock market prices are booming. Companies are seeing record profits, and yet in Arizona, inflation is higher than any other state. Housing prices are that to which it's unaffordable for newcomers coming and first-time home buyers. And the general cost of living in your district specifically is increasing. For all of you, I'm going to ask for you to talk about your plan for housing prices. What is your plan for improved housing affordability? Representative Travers, I'm going to let you go first.
Hi, thanks. Well, the first thing that we're doing is having the AG look at price fixing among apartment dwellers. There was an algorithm that, that basically created an inflated rent increase amongst a consortium of apartment dwellers. So we need to look at some of that fraud and some of that abuse. I think a lot of what we need to look at, I know Governor Hobbs has also created some incentives for first-time home buyers, tax credits, which I think is fantastic. We are doing a lot in the space of adaptive reuse. We're looking at ways that we can repurpose buildings. We're also, as was said previously, we've expanded the casita expansion, and we've looked at some middle housing opportunities. But we also need the legislature to stop preempting local control of what they feel their best housing solutions are. For example, right now we have this huge preemption by the legislature on short-term rentals. Local cities aren't allowed to control how their short-term rentals are being occupied and run. We have no moratorium on wholesale buying, so that we have a supply and demand issue. So, that it needs to be addressed holistically, because you're right, we're bringing more people in, right? We're doing business with TSMC, and we're doing business with a lot of international companies. And so people from not just around the United States are coming, but also internationally, and we need to service those people, and we need to find creative solutions.
Representative Contreras.
Well, gosh, I mean, Rep. Travers is, covered a lot of good ideas, and I agree totally with her her perspective there. A couple of things that I just want to mention is I took a tour recently of a facility over in Tempe. It's called Cul-de-sac, and it was a more compact community, and it's a carless community. It's right on the light rail. They give electric bikes to the residents there. They have local retail there also, and I just thought that this is such a great idea we can squeeze more units in when we don't have to, have all these spaces allocated for parking. And, that's something that the city of Tempe worked with to make sure that they could have fewer parking spaces, because right now rules are that you have to have so many parking spaces per unit. And also they had fewer parking spaces and allowed for more units. And they, right on the light rail and right on the, public transit and all. So we need to improve our public transit too, but that's another issue. Other ideas that was a shared home, so you have a home that you make into separate apartments and all, and professionals mostly can rent those rooms in those homes and all. And I think this is a great idea. And I asked the owners of that if maybe we can expand that for our seniors. Less expense for folks. They share the home, they share the common areas, they have their own bedroom and living space. And I think something like that is a great option. So we just need to look at different ideas, different ways to accommodate folks. Some people are just professionals coming in looking for a place to stay. But like Ms. Travers mentioned, we have this price gouging basically of apartments where it used to be $500. Now it's $1,500. For the top was $1,200. Now it's $2,500. And it's unsustainable. I work with seniors for many, many years, and they're on a fixed income. Some of these seniors are being put on the street because folks are raising their rents so much. My sister's housing went up almost 50%, and that's just not sustainable. When we have minimum wage, which fortunately is going to be going up in January, but even at a minimum wage, if you work full time, it's only $30,000 a year. That is not enough. You need at least 60,000, I think, a little bit over 60,000 to be able to make it minimum here in Arizona. And so we just need better jobs, better schools, so we can have better jobs, more money towards your schools. I'm
going to cut you off. Thank you so much. Mr. Hudson, how would you solve the housing crisis in your district?
I think there's too much regulation of housing. It's too hard to build the structures. I don't believe they have to be as expensive as they are. I think if the government would just get out of the way, I think people could build less expensive housing. I mean, we're all complicit in this. I mean, nobody in a nice, expensive house wants to live next door to poor people. So we all have to admit that we're complicit. But I think it's just too hard to build new housing stock, and that's for environmental reasons and things like that. I work for St. Vincent de Paul, and we try to stop people from becoming homeless. And what happens again and again, I mean, the rents have just skyrocketed all over the East Valley, and what we often see happening is that people form households and they're not really prepared to carry through. I mean, it was a good plan at one stage, and what we seem to facilitate oftentimes is people moving back in with other family members.
I want to transition a bit into continuing to talk about economy, more about infrastructure and the ecology of your district. District 12 includes parts of rural Arizona, which suffers from neglected roads and other infrastructure problems. What infrastructure projects in your district would you fight to get state appropriations for in the budget process? Representative Contreras, I'll go ahead and let you have the first talk on that.
Well, thank you. So State Route 347 and Riggs Road, that's the main one. I have had hundreds of emails from constituents. This is the road that comes up from Maricopa into the valley and all. And Riggs Road, that intersection is very dangerous. And I fought to keep that money, and actually, we are working on that, and there is a plan. ADOT has a plan for that particular intersection, but it is really important that we get that expanded, that intersection expanded, so that we can bring more people into the valley safer and quicker. And we have thousands of people that come from Maricopa and Gila Bend and those areas into the valley here. For medical reasons, for jobs, for entertainment and all, and that's something I definitely would fight for.
Mr. Hudson.
Oh, I can't think of anything. I'm sure there are some highways that need to be widened, and that Maricopa situation is famous. I have friends who moved out of Maricopa because they just couldn't make the commute. I feel bad for them, but that's just routine stuff. Does the state legislature have to get involved in all this stuff, or is that? I mean, it's a genuine question. Can't the municipalities handle it?
I mean, state funding of infrastructure would be something that you would be doing as a representative of your district.
Government tries to do too many things, and this is, I mean, obviously the road between Maricopa and the metropolis of Phoenix should probably be widened, and if the state legislature has to pay for it, then we'll pay for it.
Representative Travers, I want to let you kind of respond. Maybe you could respond, but also propose kind of what you'd fight for. But I'd also like you to respond to Mr. Hudson. You're muted.
I am muted. So one of the things that the legislature did a long time ago was impose a requirement for a vote of Maricopa County residents on a tax that basically funds our infrastructure in Maricopa County. And right now there is a proposition on the ballot, which is 479, which we would like a yes vote on, which is a half-cent tax that allows Maricopa County to fund its infrastructure. Because basically what happened was the rural areas felt as though they weren't, they felt like Maricopa County had weighted the federally funded application for transportation grants. And so in order to level the playing field, they created this tax on Maricopa County so that they could essentially fund themselves, which would then allow the rural counties to go ahead and apply for the federal grants that would allow them to fix their infrastructure outside of Maricopa County. But to answer your question more directly, Joseph, besides 347, I mean, I think we need to look at transportation and infrastructure holistically, right? And one of the things that was not negotiated in this proposition currently on the ballot was increased measures for funding that would allow Maricopa County to expand in a way that would bring all the different areas of Maricopa County closer together. And by that, for example, I give you an expansion of light rail. Republicans didn't want that. Democrats did. And, unfortunately, that's going to hurt, Maricopa County residents, because what we need to see is that accessibility to transportation so that people can get to jobs and not have to live where they work. So, for example, we've just kind of connected Mesa and Tempe. Can we create that kind of infrastructure so that we're not so car dependent? We see what's happening in Tempe with the roads expansion and the off ramps and on ramps that we're creating. And so I want to make sure that it all works. Everybody hates the fact that we all seem to be working on transportation at the same time and nobody can get around anywhere. I was going somewhere. I ended up in this loop. I had to go 3 miles out of my way before I could get the exit that I needed to. Which is crazy, and I think I'm going down a rabbit hole now. But
it's fine. But I do want to ask one last question before we move on to our last subject. One of the big questions that we've had from survey respondents is the question of water, and whether the candidates support a conservation program specifically for Gilbert and Morrison Ranch. I'd like to pose the question to the candidates here. What would you do, or what would you propose, or what have you proposed for the water situation in your district. I'll go ahead and let Representative Travers go first.
So thanks for that question. So basically, within the state of Arizona, we look at water in two issues separately. So an assured water supply, which deals with the municipalities and what they do, and then rural areas. And the cities themselves are actually dealing with their water situation quite well. We see my cities of Tempe, Phoenix, and Chandler dealing incredibly well with their water management, their water supplies, their water recycling. We know Phoenix is getting a new treatment plant, not different from Scottsdale's, so that we can have something like toilet to tap happening. And we have, water coming in supplies from our transportation basins. Part of the problem is, as you know, every question that you've asked so far is not in itself a question in a vacuum, right? Everything helps Arizona, and they're all tied together. So when we talk about housing, we talk about building more housing, but we have a water issue, right? Right now, we've got a water moratorium going on in the East Valley out in Queen Creek because they don't have the 100-year water supply that's required. And part of that problem is being exacerbated by a lot of loopholes like wildcat development and build to rent loopholes. And so a lot of that needs to be addressed. Conservation isn't the only answer. Conservation, augmentation, but I don't want to go down the road of augmentation, because once you commodify water like we're doing now in the East Valley with EPCOR, bringing in water, you're going to start to be able to set a price on it. And there's a huge misconception that, if you own property, the water underneath it is your own property. That's not the case. And so this is one of the most complex questions that you've asked tonight. And being a little bit wonky, I won't go on. But, is there an answer? It has to be a holistic approach with, how we manage our groundwater, what we do with conservation, what we do with augmentation, and we need to continue the measures in the municipalities with assured water supply. Right now, we're going through a process at the legislature how we're going to define some of the finer points within that. There you go.
Mr. Hudson, I want to go for you second on this. How would you solve for the water problem that your residents are facing? Is conservation the answer, or is there another solution that you would be looking at?
Well, pricing is a great solver of these kinds of problems. And the mistake I think we've made with a lot of utilities is we've emphasized low price over reliability, and then the water would have to be concerned about quality as well. I'm thinking of the analogy of electricity. I think you could do a lot in Arizona with wheeling. I was involved in trying to do that in California. We failed because in the end there were too many environmental issues and too many income redistribution issues, and it was easier to throw up your hands and walk away. But if people paid more for water when it's scarce, I think that would go a long way toward solving these allocation problems.
Wonderful. Representative Contreras, I want to let you have the last word on this before we go to our last question of the night. How would you solve this problem?
Well, we definitely need
to
take a look.
Try to do it in 2 minutes. Solve the problem in 2 minutes.
To solve it in 2 minutes that they haven't been able to solve in 100 years. Yeah, I don't think so. But Ms. Travers spoke about augmentation, conservation, and some other protections for our water systems. The cities, like she mentioned, are doing really good jobs of conserving water, reusing water, and it's our rural communities that we really need to worry about outside of the active management areas, that we need to worry about, where we've seen corporations coming in and buying huge swaths of land and putting their drills, their pumps in and drilling way past everybody else, and So the local communities are losing out on their water, and these huge corporations are using up all of the water for their big. The Saudi Arabia is one of the examples, for their big corporations and all. So those are the types of things that we need to tighten up in the legislature. I know our water group, which Ms. Travers is part of, is looking at those types of things. The rural communities want it but don't want it. They're losing water because they have to drill their pumps lower and all, or deeper. But and then we're seeing subsidence of the land and fissures, all sorts of bad things happening out in our rural communities. Again, I think we're doing pretty fair job here in the urban areas and our communities, like Ms. Travers mentioned, Phoenix, Tempe, Chandler, Gilbert. They're all are doing a great job of managing the waters here in our urban area.
Wonderful. The last question for the night goes to the same issue of transparency and bipartisanship as the questions I asked to the Senate candidates. And it really goes to working across the aisle. There has been incredible divisiveness at the state legislature with a divided House and Senate. What do you believe your job is as a state representative, and how would you work, if elected, to work across party lines in moments of intense divisiveness? I'll go ahead and let Mr. Hudson start, and then we'll go down the line from there. Mr. Hudson.
Gosh. I don't think the founders could have imagined the state we're in. I think they were mostly worried about Article 1 branch being too powerful, and they dreamed up this wonderful system of checks and balances, which has largely failed because of the reasons we've already talked about in this call. The Article 2 branch won't enforce the laws that the Article 1 branch agrees on. Parties were a good idea at one stage when parties were committed to winning, but I think I'm not a big fan of my own party. I think they've succumbed often to the temptation. It's easier to raise money from angry people when you're out of power. I'm not even sure they have the incentive necessarily to win as a party. So I don't worry too much about party lines. I mean, I think the fact that a large number of people have very good reason to think that the elections have been corrupted is a very corrosive thing. And boy, if I could play some small role in restoring faith in our elections, I think a lot of these other problems would be mitigated. The problems you refer to, the extreme ill will and if we voters felt that we could actually fire the people we had sent to represent us in the previous round, I think that would help enormously.
Wonderful. Representative Contreras.
So I'd like to think that we have a lot of common areas where we can work together. Affordable housing was one that we worked across the aisle this year. Jobs and making sure that we have good paying jobs here in our state and all. It really bothers me that we see public education as a bugaboo, that we can't, that's bad, public education. I went to public schools, my family and friends, we all went to public schools. We got a great education and all. We need to put a little bit more money and effort into making sure that we have great public schools, and we're not funding them enough. We're not funding them so that they can get great teachers, that they can have great schools, just the infrastructure and all. And it kind of pains me that we don't have that kind of bipartisanship where we can see that we can help all our folks in our communities in that way. Now, I did work with folks across the aisle this last year. I helped to pass 2764, which is for vulnerable adults in our memory care program. I was working with a member on the other side with deed fraud. So there are some areas where we see commonality, that we work together, we find those areas and all. But Democrats, we want good jobs, good communities, clean air, clean water, and great public schools and all. And sometimes we don't see eye to eye with the other side. I really wish we did. I really wish we could work together and bring our communities together that way. But we do find common ground, and we do find some things that we can work together on.
Wonderful. Representative Travers, I'm going to let you have the last comment before we go to our closing statements. Go ahead.
Yeah, I personally haven't really had any problems. I get along with all my colleagues in both the House and the Senate. I think 4 bills having passed unanimously in both chambers, I think speaks to that. But I think a lot of it is, it's trying to, understand that my colleagues, regardless of who they are all trying to do the best for their families and their communities. And you have to work from that premise. I didn't come to the legislature to do harm, and I don't think anybody else did. And so I have to acknowledge the fact that even though we might not agree on the pathways to get there, we're both trying to do the best for our families and our communities. And, as who I am, I have to stick to my big V values. And those things don't change, whether it's the right to an abortion or a fully funded education, or whether it's gun safety, which is something that we didn't talk about. Those things to me are unwavering. But are there things where we can find common ground? Yes, we can. And as long as we can acknowledge that, we can move ahead and know that we're both working forward to creating a better Arizona. And I'll give you an example, and some people might, I hope, won't vilify me. But if I see, I have some friends who are members of the Freedom Caucus, and I see them on the floor, and I will give them a hug. Somebody recently got a divorce. I text her. I said, "How are you doing? Do you need anything? How are your kids?" But I also the next day text her and said, "I can't vote on your legislation because I think it's going to be harmful." And we understood that. And as long as you have that mutual respect for, for who they want to be to their community, and know that you're going to disagree on other things, then, we can go ahead and, continue to move Arizona forward, even if it's incrementally at this stage.
Thank you very much. We're going to have our closing remarks. As I mentioned, you all get 1 minute to make those remarks. So the first closing statement will be given to Ms. Travers.
So 2 years ago, I wrote that we need a common sense approach to governing, to focus more on what divides us than what brings us together than divides us. And I've kept my word. As I mentioned, in my first term, I've had more bills get to the governor's office signed, unanimously passed both chambers, than any other freshman in the minority party since 1990. So I'm proof that we can work in a bipartisan manner and still hold on to your values. I believe that I have represented the will of the community with trust, honesty, integrity, and transparency. I'm committed to keeping our children's legacy at the center of all that I strive for on behalf of my fellow Arizonans. I see their world of opportunity getting smaller, whether it's their access to education, their own family planning decisions, the environment they'll inherit. And while we are still in the minority party, we are making progress where we can. We're stopping bad bills where we can so that we don't go backwards. So I hope that you will reelect me. I'm still in this fight for their future and for yours too. For more information, go to www.traversforaz.com. Please make sure you vote all the way up and down the ballot, including for our school board candidates. Remember, when you're voting, vote ABC.
Wonderful. Mr. Hudson.
How small of all that human hearts endured, that part which laws and kings can cause or cure. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear Father, we pray to you for the grace of humility and for the grace of loving you with all our hearts, all our minds, all our souls, and all our strength. We pray that you fill our hearts with gratitude to you, Lord. We pray that you give us the strength to love our enemies and to act always and only in the ways that glorify you. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you for listening to me.
Represented by the Contreras.
Thank you. I was a public servant for over 30 years, and I am continuing my public service in the state legislature. I've taken many meetings with constituents, taken many meetings with interested people and different things that I'm interested in. And I've made myself accessible to you here in the public on a monthly basis here at a coffee shop in Tempe. That's why I was, well, you don't know that I was late, but I was late getting on earlier. But as your state legislature, it's my job to listen to you, the voter, and to advocate for our district and for all Arizonans. As your state legislature, I will protect your rights, your voting rights, your right to your bodily autonomy. I will work to increase funding for public schools. Water is very important to issue that I will continue to work towards finding solutions. I appreciate the audience tuning in tonight. I humbly ask for your support again this year. The website that you want to go to if you want to get our voting guide is azld12dems.org. And my website is Contreras for AZ, FORAZ.net. And humbly ask for your support again this year.
Wonderful. Thank you to the House Representative candidates for debating. We appreciate your participation. To our candidates, we thank you again. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves for the November 5th general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Have a great night.